Why would any government in the world actually stonewall an investigation against one of its richest businessmen with close proximity to the powers that be, and in areas, capital intensive areas like infrastructure, which are largely government funded? Why would a government stonewall an investigation with these charges? And I think that is a scandal by itself. In fact, if you ask me, and I'm going to step it up a little bit, it almost shows complicity. What was Mr. Modi's government doing between November till now? I mean, were they so cocky or arrogant, or believe that Donald Trump would just kind of, come and sandbag Mr. Adani? Well, let me tell you, Donald Trump is a smart American businessman. He's a transactional guy. I'm worried whether he's not going to use this as a negotiating instrument with the Indian government, which wants to protect Mr. Adani. That's hardly a secret. I think the worry for Mr. Modi is that now he has no choice but to defend Adani, because I'm sure Adani knows the entire inner operations of how he and the government function. I can tell you Mr. Adani has very limited elbow room. What can happen is, things that we don't know, back channels that operate to salvage Mr. Adani's reputation. Not easy anymore at all. In no country in the world would the current SEBI chairperson have survived. She would have had to resign long ago. You had, I think, the Supreme Court of India under the previous Chief Justice doing a very cosmetic committee which never delivered, because they just made some kind of, extremely boilerplate responses, went nowhere. So, you have had a very compromised system in this country. Technically, Mr. Adani should by now have, on his own, voluntarily fought the case, right? Nothing stopped. He doesn't have to wait for all this. He has to fight the case. There are serious allegations. Now, he is obviously waiting for something to happen at a governmental level that can spare him the whole legal or the judicial process. Now, therefore, I said that that's exactly what at this level, because remember, the allegations are not just against the BJP here. It's about the proximity of this gentleman with the Prime Minister of India, right? So I think we are now in a very slippery slope where the BJP is concerned.
Hello and a warm welcome to HW News Network, your one-stop show, truth be told, for some engaging and thought-provoking conversations. US Securities and Exchange Commission has asked the Indian authorities for help in its investigation of Adani Group founder Gautam Adani and his nephew over alleged securities fraud and a 265 billion bribery scheme. A court filing has shown that. Now, the regulator told a New York district court that it was making efforts to serve its complaints on the founder and his nephew Sagar Adani, and was seeking help from India's law ministry. This is what the Reuters report has said. And they've also mentioned that neither individual is in US custody and both are in India. So therefore, the SEC has requested assistance under the Hague Service Convention. And what exactly they've said, this is what exactly the line was, that SEC has requested assistance under the Hague Service Convention. It also said in the court filing. Now, the Adani Group and the Law Ministry of India did not immediately respond to the Reuters request for the comment. And this status filing comes just a week later when Prime Minister Modi said that he did not discuss Adani case with US President Donald Trump during his visit to Washington, describing it to the reporters as an individual issue never discussed by the leaders. Now, this latest filing by the SEC, now, does it go to show that the Indian government is not cooperating actually with the SEC as far as the investigations into Adani are concerned? Is it an on-the-record admission of the fact that the government is continues to protect Gautam Adani and is not cooperating with the American authorities. Joining me now this evening is Sanjay, veteran political commentator, author, and columnist. Thank you so much, Sanjay, for joining. And it's always a pleasure having you on the program. And this status filing by the SEC in New York's Brooklyn court, what does it actually show? They've said that they've asked for the assistance from the Law Ministry under the Hague Convention. Is it an on-record admission of the fact that the government continues to evade the investigation on Adani and it's not ready to help at all, no matter what?
First and foremost, great to be on your program, Neelu. I think your viewers need to know a couple of things. Number one, this matter is going to reach its logical conclusion unless President Donald Trump, who is issuing all kinds of executive orders, decides not to execute or rather implement the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which is very much part of American regulations. It's possible. But here is the fundamental problem for Mr. Modi's government. And these are things that we need to ponder about. In November of 2024, you have the FBI, you have the SEC, which is independent, not like India's SEBI, and you have the Eastern District Court of New York, which says that Gautam Adani and his group and the people you mentioned stand indicted. What does indicted really mean? It doesn't mean that he's convicted, so he can fight his case. But the indictment basically means that there is a substantive evidence which has been submitted and the court believes that a trial needs to be held. Now, that to me is where the problem for Mr. Modi and his government, because we all know their close proximity with Gautam Adani, is going to be a real challenge for them. Ask yourself a question, Neelu, and the viewers as well. Why would any government in the world actually stonewall an investigation against one of its richest businessmen with close proximity to the powers that be, and in areas, capital intensive areas like infrastructure, which are largely government funded? Why would a government stonewall an investigation? It's bizarre that because obviously big media will never ask these questions, you have been doing it and others as well, that between November till February of 2025, Mr. Modi's government has not even bothered to actually call Mr. Adani and confront him with these charges. And I think that is a scandal by itself. In fact, if you ask me, and I'm going to step it up a little bit, it almost shows complicity, right? Supposing somebody is accused, and this is a cross-border, high-profile case. And let me tell you, Neelu, I have worked with a couple of American companies until Trump has come along, and we'll see what Trump does. I mean, you're talking about a madman theory in his case. But the truth is that if you lie to the US investors, because in this case, it is about US investors who are denied certain information, they take it extremely seriously. They do. So far, they have. There could be some very serious consequences, which is why arrest warrants are issued, right? Now, what you're seeing today is that in a formal procedural process, you find that they have said that we have sent the summons for Mr. Adani, which means basically providing him with the legal notice, saying that, well, you have to come and make your case. Either Mr. Adani is going to say I'm guilty or not guilty. If he says guilty, there will be consequences, whatever. If he says not guilty, there will be a proper jury trial. Can Mr. Modi save Mr. Adani, or can his government do that? We'll have to wait and see. But one thing is pretty obvious, and this is as clear as daylight. What was Mr. Modi's government doing between November till now? I mean, were they so cocky or arrogant or believe that Donald Trump would just kind of, come and sandbag Mr. Adani? Well, let me tell you, Donald Trump is a smart American businessman. He's a transactional guy. I'm worried whether he's not going to use this as a negotiating instrument with the Indian government, which wants to protect Mr. Adani. That's hardly a secret. And actually, India as a country gets further compromised.
No, you're confident, Sanjay, that Adani probably could be used as a negotiating instrument by Trump, because whatever scenarios are emerging, the meeting with Donald Trump of Prime Minister Modi and whatever developments we have seen so far, it seems the
Right.
larger picture is that Trump doesn't consider Adani as a very important entity, and the courts are
Mhm.
doing their bit. The Brooklyn court is doing what it should be, and this is what
Mhm.
the status filing also shows.
Yeah. Let me tell you, I mean, I believe that Donald Trump is a smart, scheming man. I mean, he will have no love for anybody from India, including Mr. Modi. If you looked at the reception that Mr. Modi got, he was not even invited at the prime time, which would have given him big media publicity in India, right? You know that it was received by just a regular person, not by Donald Trump himself. And I can tell you that I think the Ministry of External Affairs has ended up embarrassing Mr. Modi by that press conference, which has to be the most disastrous press conference that I have ever seen in my life of an Indian Prime Minister. Now, Mr. Modi was asked a question on Adani. You heard his answer. It was absolutely out of sync with what he had to actually respond. He said Adani is an individual or a personal matter. Is Adani a personal matter? For God's sake, he flew with Mr. Modi in an official plane or whatever as part of the entourage, and he got very prime government contracts from foreign governments. We all know that he's got these airports given to him against an opposition made by Niti Aayog. For I don't think we even need to talk about it. Mr. Modi went for his swearing in ceremony as a prime minister in 2014 on Adani's plane. I think let's not even go down this road. I think the worry for Mr. Modi is that now he has no choice but to defend Adani, because I'm sure Adani knows the entire inner operations of how he and the government function.
No,
And I
but
think
Sanjay, do you think that this latest filing by the SEC in the Brooklyn court does it tighten the leash on Adani further? I mean, we do not know when the trial is going to begin and what the processes will be. But since the SEC status filing does mention about the fact that they've asked for assistance from the law ministry under the Hague Convention, now if the government doesn't pay heed, then obviously the next step would be that they will seek extradition of Gautam Adani, to which the government may agree, may not agree. Both scenarios are there. And looking at the way they have approached the Adani matter and the Adani investigation, it seems that the Modi government will continue to give him a cover up. So in that case, do you think that now the courts will tighten the leash on Adani?
Well, I can tell you, Mr. Adani has very limited elbow room. What can happen is, things that we don't know, back channels that operate to salvage Mr. Adani's reputation. Not easy anymore at all. And I'll tell you the other problem, which your viewers ought to know, that the American courts have said that approximately rupees 2,200 crores were paid to government officials. Now, if you hear the BJP, they will say they were paid in certain Congress ruled states. That's not the point. The point is that it also included Jammu and Kashmir directly under Mr. Modi's government. That's not the point. The point is they were paid to government officials. Now, ask yourself a question. If there is an allegation of the richest businessman in the world who is close to the government having paid bribes to government officials, no matter which state, isn't it the responsibility of Mr. Modi's government to investigate it? I mean, the famous trinity or the trifecta of ED, CBI, and income tax just decided to not look at it at all. I mean, kya hua bhaiya? Huh? The famous Trinity went dead. They went into hiding. So clearly there is an attempt to conceal something. I'll tell you what I think is the problem. And I'm speaking again as an outsider. If, firstly, given the fact that Gautam Adani's relationship with the government is pretty well known, and the most powerful man in the country is supposed to be one of his biggest protectors or his patrons, and Mr. Adani is the blue-eyed boy of the BJP. You should see how BJP spokespersons defend him on TV shows, as if they are his PR company or his legal consultants. Here is a question. Why did Mr. Modi's government not investigate those bribery charges? Get it? Supposing they were convinced that it had to do something to do with the Andhra government of Jagan Mohan Reddy or whatever, hey, establish the case. right? After all, you're masters in political vendetta. My worry is, and this is what I suspect could be the reason why Mr. Modi's government is not investigated Adani for the last 3 months. I mean, it's a scandal, it's a shocker. I mean, I've heard of plutocracy, I've heard of the Gilded Age. This is the first time in broad light democracy that a man is accused of bribery charges by the US government. And the Indian government actually went to town in the early days saying this is a conspiracy of the Congress and George Soros to destabilize India, even blaming the United States. I mean, can you believe that? You are endangering your entire diplomatic, shall we say, credentials with the United States to save Adani. So clearly there's a can of worms here. And I think Neelu focus on this point. Who are these people who got the bribe? Okay, because tell me, who in the government, which bureaucrat will have the guts to tell Adani that you pay me bribe, otherwise I won't give you permission, or I won't give you whatever certain, whatever legal documents, etc., that need an approval? Who has the guts to do that, right? So I have a strong feeling that this needs to be investigated, because this could be a very convenient operation. And we're all in a state of allegation at the moment, because this will have to go through a jury trial, and Mr. Adani has every right to defend himself. That at the moment, the bigger question is that if these bribes were paid, why were they paid? And finally, where did this money go? And I can tell you for a fact that I feel that this is where the BJP has got something to hide. There is no other reason why the party actually did not even investigate Mr. Adani for the last 3 months, and has so far not responded to this request to serve the judicial summons, which, as per the Hague Convention, you're obligated to do that. And third, like it or not, you have an extradition treaty with America.
No, but what happens, Sanjay, if the Indian government continues to stonewall this assistance which the US court has sought? What happens if they continue to stonewall this?
Well, let me tell you, I think it's about time that India's opposition, particularly the Congress party, recognized that it's not going to be enough to just hold one press conference. It's not going to be enough to put out these great tweets. You need to create a public awareness and make it simplistic. I'll give you an example. The reason why the Adani issue, which I believe is one of the biggest scams, probably along with electoral bonds after 1947, and yet Mr. Modi's government continues as if it doesn't care a damn, it continues in a blasé fashion, is because you got to convey this corruption or this crony capitalism, or what is called as the robber barons having a field day, by making it simple and in a very comprehensive language for the common man. The common man is not going to understand cross-border risks. They're not going to understand, a violation of investor interests in America, right? You got to tell them, what does this mean for the common man? Because end of day, this is about India's national resources being diverted to a businessman, right? I'm talking about the entire Adani issue, not just this particular one. And talk about, that's the reason why India's inequality has worsened, because a couple of A's and a couple of very influential businessmen today do control India's wealth. It's a fact, right? So as you can see, Elon Musk in America with Donald Trump, which is an open embrace of what I would call as the oligarchs now are openly running governments. I can tell you for a fact it's no different in India. Can you tell me a businessman who feels that the government will not go after him under any circumstances, whose politicians and leaders will defend them in parliament and on TV studios? Clearly, the influence on regulation, the influence on policy, the influence on government must be humongous. And I think everyone who's watching your program should know it, because they are paying a huge price for it.
Rightly pointed out that the Americans are no different when there's an open embrace of, the relationship between Donald Trump and Elon Musk. But getting away slightly from that, since we know for a fact that US laws, the enforcement at least of those laws,
Yeah.
is a very serious process. It doesn't happen like the way it happens in India,
Right.
taking everyone for granted, and laws not being different for different people. For the elite and the poor, the law looks like a different ball game altogether. But
Right.
will Donald Trump or the US laws force Modi to dissociate himself with Gautam Adani? Do you speculate that a situation may arise? I'm underlining the word may. That can a situation arise where Modi may dissociate himself with Gautam Adani? Or do you think that this is an association which is absolutely inextricable?
And Neelu, in my opinion, Mr. Modi and Mr. Adani's inextricably, to borrow your word, intertwined relationship over decades is going to be of, I think, a function of several documentaries and Netflix series at some point in the future when India breathes again. There is no way that anybody can escape that. I mean, just look at his extraordinary growth. I mean, it's remarkable that a man who was not who's not like a Nvidia story, became the richest man in a couple of years. I mean, look at the astronomical growth. Now, I'm not saying that everything that Gautam Adani is doing is probably fishy or requires an investigation, but there are a lot of questions that were raised by Hindenburg. And SEBI was a disaster, an absolute disaster. I can tell you that in no country in the world would the current SEBI chairperson have survived. She would have had to resign long ago. You had, I think, the Supreme Court of India under the previous Chief Justice doing a very cosmetic committee which never delivered because they just made some kind of, extremely boilerplate responses, went nowhere. So, you have had a very compromised system in this country. Every arm of what should have been an independent institution probing in depth in a very penetrative sort of a way never happened. The Supreme Court didn't follow up. The SEBI has been an absolute disaster. Can you imagine that SEC, which is the counterpart in America, is asking questions on Adani, and SEBI here is literally like a doormat. So the truth that we all know, you know it and I know it. The bhakts who watch your program will say that you and I are on a rant. But the truth is this, Neelu. India under Narendra Modi is now no longer a functioning democracy. We have become feudal. We are now literally in the hands of a few people, and he might win elections. So every time they will win an election, they believe it's a mandate for all the corruption or poor governance that is going on. But what is the bottom line? India's entire systems are rigged. I mean, look at the Election Commission's appointment at the midnight hour. Absolutely. The Chief Justice of India has been thrown out. Why did the Supreme Court take so long to respond is something that even I can't fathom for the life of me.
In fact, we were expecting that case might come up today in the Supreme Court. So far, I haven't heard anything of that. So which means that the courts are reluctant.
Neither that they have enough time to pronounce moral verdicts on a YouTube, or good or bad. I don't want to even comment on that. We are in a very absurd dystopian. Absolutely, like watching. I feel sometimes when I wake up and read the papers and watch some television and social media, are we living in an age of reality television? Right? You have Elon Musk running the country, standing with his kid on his shoulders. Mr. Modi, poor Mr. Modi. I'm a critic of Mr. Modi, but felt very sad to see the Indian Prime Minister get so humiliated and embarrassed. He's sitting with his entire team of foreign delegation with Mr. Modi. And on the other side, there is Elon Musk sitting with his children and nannies. I mean, clearly we are living in a very surreal world. India is not helping his case under Modi. That's the tragedy. If India had a statesman-like leader, they would have probably handled the situation very differently. I can tell you that to me, it's an absolute shocker that here is an allegation of bribery and a securities fraud against Mr. Adani. Mr. Modi's government doesn't investigate. The big media, where I go pretty often, obviously don't talk about it. The Janta is brainwashed into believing it's just, the Congress is anti-corporate because it's questioning Adani. Unfortunately, even the Congress doesn't double down on it, but it says it and then it backs down for some absolutely obtuse reasons. I think India needs a leader with some spine. India needs people like you in civil society. There are wonderful YouTubers, and I think India's got great talent. I think just people have become so scared of speaking up. It just emboldens Mr. Modi and the BJP to say we'll do what we want. I mean, I'll come back to that point. Mr. Modi is getting away by not doing anything at all about the Adani case until he's going to be forced to. So that answers the last question, Neelu. Will Mr. Modi at some point distance himself completely from Mr. Adani? He's a politician, right? At the end of the day, I can tell you, having been in politics for a long time, it's a very ruthless space. And that's one of the reasons why you find that in India, whether it's Bollywood, which dances through the tune of politicians, whether it's sports stars, or whether it's businessmen, none of them dare to take on a political leader. Forget a prime minister, even at a local level. So I feel if Mr. Modi has to dump Mr. Adani, he will.
Okay, so you're saying that there might be a situation where Modi will have to dump Adani, but then this latest status filing by the SEC in the Brooklyn court, will it worry Modi and Adani to a bit? I mean, they will continue to stonewall the investigation, but there will be a limit beyond which they will not be able to, put hurdles to the process. So does it worry at this point of time? Will Modi and Adani get worried because of this?
Well, I can tell you, if they're not worried about it now, then I think clearly they're living in a fool's paradise. Because this matter is now spun out of control. And, their only hope is that somewhere Donald Trump comes and circumvents this entire process. But to the best of my knowledge, when you're indicted by the courts in America in a case of the kind that we're talking about, it means that there is substantive evidence. You see, they come to a number, right? The number is what, $265 million, right? Why isn't it 300? Why isn't it 200? So there is a logic. There must be a certain accumulation of contracts, which gives them the level of corruption at 265 million. They obviously know that there are certain government officials that have been paid. There will be an audit. There will be an audit or a financial trail that will tell you where and how it happened. In fact, you already know it was in several states. Now, the question is, why aren't we able to find out in India who this is? Imagine, Neelu, for a moment, if it was an opposition leader, if it was anybody in this country who had an acquisition. You remember Karti Chidambaram, 1 crore, man, just 1 crore, right? They took him to the cleaners, and, end of day, we saw what happened. Many of the people have had charges of lakhs and a couple of things here and there. And you have ED, CBI harassing people, threatening them with cases. 2,200 crores, no action. See, at some point, I need to say this, societies also at some point get bludgeoned with this belief that, Mr. Modi can do no wrong. But, if your moral conscience is so inanimate or dead, then the politician will do what he or she wants to do. But I think...
Right. No, you were saying something. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. When you asked me, should Mr. Adani or Mr. Modi be worried? Well, just let's do a role play here. If you were Mr. Modi and I was Mr. Adani, I'm telling you there would be sleepless nights, right? Yeah. And just think about it, that this matter hasn't died. You kind of disenfranchised Rahul Gandhi when he raised it up. You called the Hindenburg a conspiracy with George Soros. You talked about the US government being in a conspiracy with the Congress party. The matter hasn't died, and it won't. It won't, because you see, these things have their own life. They don't die. It's just it's out there in the sky, and it's for everyone to see. And, the arrogance of politicians, especially authoritarians, worse, fascists, is they believe they're forever, and they believe their political parties will be the establishment for all their lives. And this is what, arrogance does to you, right? You believe you're infallible and nothing will happen. But as the history of the world shows, it comes back to
I remember In fact, what you just mentioned reminded me of the fact that Rahul Gandhi did demand Adani's arrest during the parliament session, not the recent session, but
Yeah.
the one in which the
Yeah.
Hindenburg report came out, and he said that we demand Adani's arrest. But I was speaking to a few people in the morning after this report on the status filing of the SEC broke. So at that time, few people I was talking to, they said that haven't you seen Indians being handcuffed and sent back to India? So you might expect a similar fate of Adani, that Adani might be handcuffed by the US officials and would be extradited. Do you see that as a possibility? Because if they continue to stonewall the investigations, if they continue not to respond, and willingly they are not responding, so obviously the US courts, they're not going to leave the matter there. And he's facing serious charges. So do you expect this possibility that he might be handcuffed and he will be sent back to US?
Well, let me tell you that technically, Mr. Adani should by now have, on his own, voluntarily fought the case. Right? Nothing stopped. He doesn't have to wait for all this. He has to fight the case. There are serious allegations. Now, he is obviously waiting for something to happen at a governmental level that can spare him the whole legal or the judicial process. Now, therefore, I said that that's exactly what at this level, because remember, the allegations are not just against the BJP here. It's about the proximity of this gentleman with the Prime Minister of India, right? So I think we are now in a very slippery slope where the BJP is concerned. I think they must be extremely anxious, because it's possible that at some point there will be a request for extradition. What will Mr. Modi's government do? Now, I do believe that there will be a lot of back channel negotiations to save them the political embarrassment. But I feel that the people of India, if they haven't even now understood that this is a very blatant case of cronyism, of corruption, of skullduggery, of regulatory frauds, I think then we have just maybe changed, because I was part of the Congress and the UPA that lost the 2014 Lok Sabha election on corruption charges that were never proven, which were notional losses. Neelu, they were notional losses. Can you believe that? Yeah. And here, we are okay with electoral bonds. We are okay with the Adani shenanigans. We are okay with Rafale. We are okay with all kinds of CAG reports and corruption. We are okay. So I think this is a question that the people of India will have to ask themselves. Why have you changed? And why is your moral elasticity swinging to just one side and not being fair on all sides at the same time?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll have to end it here. Thank you so much, Sanjay. Always a pleasure having you on the program. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you, Neelu. Bye.
Bye.
Stay ahead with our Cutting Edge News app. Instantly access the latest shorts in just 1 minute and breaking news in just 50 words. Download now for a smarter, faster news experience.